Today I'm going to talk about these two similar looking 34mm Rolex watches. Since they both have the same sized oyster case and a similar 19mm wide oyster bracelet, they have almost an identical wrist presence and they also both have the same overall feel. Despite these similar aesthetic features, these two are different watches. The left one is a Rolex Oyster Perpetual date reference number 1500 and the right one is a Rolex Oysterdate Precision reference number 6694. The main difference between these watches can be spotted from the name of the first mention, Perpetual. The word refers to an automatic self-winding movement. The Rolex Oyster Perpetual date is basically the little sibling of a more well-known Rolex Datejust. Instead of calling these 34mm Datejusts, Rolex used the model name Date instead. This reference 1500 was in production from the early 60s until the late 70s. Earlier watches housed a caliber 1565 movement, but movement was later updated to the caliber 1575 movement, which had a hacking feature and a slightly better power reserve compared to its predecessor. This piece is from the late 70s and it houses the updated caliber 1575 movement. An interesting feature with the 6694 is that it houses the Rolex 1225 movement, which is a manual winding movement. Rolex is more well known for making self-winding automatic movements, and there are only a few models which have housed a manual winding movement, like Cellini and Dayton. Manual winding movement makes this discreet looking watch feel a bit special. And I personally like manual winding watches because I find that it's a satisfying routine to wind your mechanical watch in this world where cars are starting to drive themselves. This quirky little watch was in production for almost 3 decades, from the early 60s until the late 80s, when it was discontinued once and for all. The movement of the watch is not SOSC certified, so that's why its dial is missing the superlative chronometer official certified text, which can be found from many other Rolex watches, like from the dial of the 1500. From the aesthetic point of view, I find it so good that the text is missing because it gives the dial more simple look. These both watches have a similar text here below the 6 o'clock marker, the T-Swiss T here and the T-Swiss made T here. The T indicates that the watch contains tritium. Tritium is a radioactive substance that watch manufacturers use as a luminescence material until it was banned in 1998. Although it's a radioactive substance, this small amount under the glass is harmless. The half-life of tritium is 12 years, so lume dots of these watches have stopped glowing already some time ago. These both watches are 34mm in diameter, which is considered quite small these days. Someone could say that they feel bigger on your wrist compared to other vintage 34mm watches, since they actually don't feel much smaller than 36mm Rolexes. Here's a side-by-side comparison with 36mm Explorer. I personally feel that 34mm is a small size, but the size makes them feel very comfortable on your wrist. They are so light that you can almost forget that you are even wearing a watch. There is a small difference in the wrist presence of these watches. The 1500 sits a bit higher than the 6694. That's because the 6694 has a flat case back, which makes the watch quite thin compared to other Rolex watches. They both have a thick acrylic crystal plexiglass, which looks great, The glass is not very scratch resistant, so it scratches pretty easily. Luckily, those scratches can be removed by polishing. They both have a screw down crown and they are rated water resistant, but it's not recommended to swim with a 40-year-old watch. These are discreet watches and they are perfect if you want to fly under the radar. They both have this classic timeless look and they are great all-rounder watches for everyday use, whether you are wearing a suit or something more casual. And you can change the character of these watches by replacing the oyster bracelet. For example, with a leather strap, it becomes a full-blooded dress watch. Changing the bracelet is a simple trick to do thanks to these lug holes. Like mentioned, lug width is actually 19mm, so there is not that wide selection for straps out there compared to more common sizes. I find that these watches are interesting to collect since there are many variations out there. There are different colored dials, different bracelets, different bezels, and then there are also two-tone and full-gold versions of these watches. These days, vintage Rolexes are reaching all-time high prices, but these two still represent a great value for your hard-earned money and relatively cheap access to the world of vintage Rolexes. These both watches are approximately in the same price point, and you can still probably find a naked watch without box and papers for low 3,000 euros, but if you want the top condition piece with box and papers, you have to pay around 4,000 euros. But which one to pick? If I was looking for a daily beater, I would go with the 1500. It's a more practical watch, since it's an automatic watch with a hacking feature, and overall it feels a bit more modern than the 6694. Also, I would try to find the watch with a light colored dial, because a light colored dial makes the watch look a little bigger than a dark colored dial. If I was looking just for a fun piece to add my collection, I would go with the 6694. It's not the most sought after collector's piece, but like I said, it feels a bit special. Instead, 1500 feels more just a light version of a Datejust. Also, if you want to add a manual winding Rolex to your collection, there are not many substitutes out there. Thank you for watching.